Hello.
Hello.
Tal, you run a theatre company called Hide and Seek Theatre. And Hide and Seek Theatre has produced several shows now, and I know that they have been performed for young audiences, but they were not necessarily intended for young audiences. Can you tell us about the process of how that came about and what you discovered about the show?
Yeah, well, none of them was initially intended for young audiences. We just created a show, and we never kind of thought, we just thought about our own kind of like age audience when we created, because we create for just theatre goers, just adults. We don't think about the age as you do when you create for young audiences. You really think like, am I creating for a 3-year-old or for a 13-year-old? It's very different. But for us, we just created a show that we thought was going to be interesting or funny or whatever. But when the show is done, you can look at it and see, okay, yeah, maybe it's not for a 3-year-old because they won't get it. But I think that 14-year-olds, 15, even 16, I mean definitely 16 years old, they can get everything we can get, really. You can make special shows for them if you want to deal with like certain subjects, or I don't know, but 16 years old, they can go and just watch adult theatre, right? And they'll get it. Of course, they'll get whatever we get. So when we had the opportunity to perform in front of young audiences, yeah, we said yes, and the response always was great, because shows that don't kind of patronize and try and intend themselves for younger people who understand less or whatever, they kind of get accepted really well. So hopefully that was the case. Anyway, I don't know, but it worked really well.
Did any of the shows change at all when you started performing them for young audiences, or did they stay exactly
not
the same?
In content. They stayed the same in terms of content. Of course, they change because whenever the audience is different, every night the show is a bit different. And when the audience is a lot younger, then the parts that all of a sudden they really laugh, whereas with like adult audience, they don't laugh as much or don't laugh at all for this part, or things that really kind of work really well, or maybe they don't work, so they kind of, they do respond to the show a bit differently, and it's always interesting to see.
Do you remember any specific things that you realised didn't work? Was there anything you had to go in and actually consciously change because the audience didn't respond the way it would?
Well, there was nothing that we needed to change. There was one thing that kind of like for me it was very strong, and it was a piece that I performed in, and the beginning of the piece is very funny. It's very comical and people always laugh. And then the end of the piece is really kind of serious and mellow and abstract and kind of a bit. And when I performed it to the younger audience, to teenagers, they laughed their heads off in the third final part. Maybe because they laughed before and they just kind of like thought, that was again meant to be funny. And I don't know if I would have changed it. I haven't performed it in front of a young audience again, but I don't know if I would have changed it. It did work, they enjoyed it, they really laughed, they loved it. But for me it was a bit of kind of like, ooh, it wasn't supposed to be like that, so I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of like the strongest thing that happened, like the strongest difference in terms of how they perceive the show.
You've talked about laughter and the audience kind of responding to comedy. Do you think that that's an important way in for a younger audience?
I think it's an important way in for any audience, laughter. It's not necessary, but it's a very good tool. I love working with this tool. I love working with laughter, even in really serious kind of drama. I think, you know, moments of laughter are very strong for any audience. So yeah, I don't know if they're more so with young audience. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's easier because we can. I don't know.
I know that you also have very strong opinions on content and the representation. Basically, which stories are being told. Do you want to say something about that?
Yes. It was always something that I was very aware of, and since I have 2 kids, I'm even more aware of, just because I get more. I go and see more shows, I read more books for kids, and I just consume more literature for kids. And the representation of the balance or the imbalance between boys and girls, men and women, in literature and in everything they consume is just so bad. There's so many stories about little boys, and there are a few stories about little girls, and it's a very, very strong imbalance. And not just that, but also what they do, how they do it, what's expected from them, how they are in their characteristics, how they're described. So really this is something that when I create, and I've got ideas now to create for kids, like all sorts of things, and when I create things, that's always one of the things that I'm really focused on, and I make sure that whatever kind of like paradigms we have in our head about like how a story should be told, what sort of characters should be there, is addressed, and is not coming from my subconscious that's programmed in that way, but I'm doing it in a very aware way. Like if you take stories about animals, for example, all of the animals are male, almost. All of them. And it's just, it shouldn't be like, why should it be like that? So yeah, when I tell stories right now, when I write, when I make my future materials, this is something I put really strong focus in, because I think it is very important for little girls, and it's even more important for little boys to see different representations than what we see today, to understand that there is, you know, that things are not how we tell them right now, they are what they are.
A lot of writers and a lot of theatre makers, but perhaps writers in particular, have a very strong, a lot of them have a very strong relationship to their, the moment of inspiration, to the original idea, so I think a lot of people just want to write whatever comes to their mind first. And of course, having to be very conscious and kind of throwing out your first ideas, I think can feel very alien to a lot of writers. Do you think the writers have a responsibility to go against their first instinct?
Well, we all have, especially when we deal with young people, but even when we just deal with people, we all have responsibility towards what we tell, because what we tell, and especially what we tell young people, is going to shape the way they view the world. And if our instinct is to put out there a story that describes life not in a way we think they should be really, or not in a way that they are really, I think, yeah, we do have responsibility to address that, and to think, of course, you know, I'm not asking anyone to put out stuff they don't like or they don't feel connected to, but to just be aware of how much, what more we can tell, because we just tell very narrow story. It's not a bad story about the little boy who lost, you know, whatever, and he's looking for his dog. it's not a bad story, it's okay, but it's just one story. We can tell so many different stories, and just to be aware of it and just to open it and just to try and put those stories in as well, I feel it makes the experience for the writers as well richer and make them more free to choose more options in the world, to not feel limited to one type of story that we're telling.
Does this mean that all writing is political in a sense then?
Everything's political. Yes, I mean, you know, it's socially political. So yeah, I mean, if we tell a story about a girl with two mothers, or about mixed race kids, or about anything that's not told right now or not told enough, then it is political, because we are getting people who are not getting enough exposure in literature, in culture. We're giving them this exposure that they need, because, you know, especially kids, we need role models, we need someone to look up to and to think, oh, I want to be like that. If we don't have it, then we just kind of like sink in our own kind of, you know, we can't do anything, we're just what we are, that's it. So yes, it is political, because we can inspire kids to be what, you know, to dream more.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.